Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. The BC government just announced more changes coming to condos and townhome bylaws, significant ones where if you are a buyer, probably work out really well for you. If you are a seller, they may end up costing you more money in the long run. Real quick, if this is your first time to the channel, my name is Hassan. I'm a real estate agent in the Vancouver area, and I make educational real estate content to help you on your real estate journey. I also make content designed to help you make your move in and around Vancouver. So if that sounds interesting to you and you wanted to chat about your own real estate situation with me one-on-one, you can book me for a free call in the Calendly link below. But regardless, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a future video. So another week, another set of changes from the provincial government. Gonna jump right into it. When it comes to stratified properties, and generally stratified properties are condos, townhomes, as well as some bare land stratas, which we'll touch on as well, but mainly for condos and townhomes. One of the, I guess you could say, issues out there when you're buying or you own one of these properties is there's a report that gets provided to buyers, and it's obviously a report if you're an owner as well, called a depreciation report. And what that is, it's when an engineering or a consulting firm comes in to your development, whether it's a high-rise tower or a townhome development, and they come in and they do a full-on assessment of the property. In fact, I did a video on depreciation reports. I will link it here just so you can get a background of what it is. But they do a full investigation into the property in terms of shelf life of the components, i.e. the windows, the roof, the boilers, the replacement costs at that time, how much it would cost to replace these items, when it's expected that you're going to have to replace them, and then also providing different funding models for the strata to follow, so people are not hit with a surprise special levy. They're geared up for it by way of either an increase in strata fees or a portion strata levy. So it's a planning tool for stratas. And how the legislation had worked is that every 3 years, if you're a part of a strata, you have to get a depreciation report. But if 75% of the owners of that strata voted to defer it to the next year, they could just defer it. And so ultimately what would end up happening is a depreciation report would be done or not. And every year at the annual general meeting, it would get deferred and deferred and deferred and deferred. And it would get to the point where you have some stratas out there. I've come across a couple here in New West where they've been in existence for 30 years and they don't actually have this depreciation report. So what the provincial government now has mandated is they said, look, depreciation report, you have to get one done every 5 years. If your strata has 5 or more units, you can no longer defer it. Every 5 years, you're going to get a depreciation report done. They've also listed out guidelines, what needs to be in the report. They are all fairly standard, but now there's a new set of guidelines and also who can conduct that report. So now that you know what a depreciation report is, let's talk about why having one is a good or a bad thing and how this legislation basically surrounds all of that. So, if you are a buyer of a property, you are given 2-year sets of strata documents for you to be able to review, as well as any depreciation reports, engineering reports that are done on the building. The example I just mentioned where we had a building where it was 30 years in existence with no depreciation report. My client was interested in it, interested in buying, and there just was not enough data for us to be able to determine what sort of costs would be upcoming with this building and whether or not the building was planning correctly for these upcoming costs. As I mentioned in the depreciation report, there's different funding models, and the Strata Corporation would basically pick one. And they'd say, we're gonna follow this path, whether that means a little bit of a strata fee increase, plus special levy, whatever it might be. We're gonna follow this funding model. And if you don't have a depreciation report, you're flying blind because the only thing you have are 2 years worth of minutes. So if there weren't any mentions of any upgrades done over the 2 years, you really don't know. Now, one thing that you can do is you can obviously get an inspection done at a condo or a townhome, and it often does. Now, the issue is this: when we're inspecting these condos, these townhomes, representing the buyer, I'm always requesting access to the common areas. That might be the roof, so the inspector can get up to the roof, the boiler room, the mechanical rooms, whatever it might be. Occasionally, the strata can't get us access into these areas for certain buildings. So again, your inspector comes in, they really don't know condition of the roof. Now, some of them are using drones now to be able to get up there and take a look, but there's so much unknown. And when there's a lot of unknown, it's not just unfortunate for the buyer, but some lenders as well do not want to lend on a building, an older building that has no depreciation report. So in the building example I talked about, believe it or not, they deferred and deferred and deferred and deferred for 30 years. And so my buyer had to walk away because we didn't have enough data there. So that depreciation report, from a buyer perspective, it's very important for certain types of buildings, especially when they are older. Now, one of the things with this legislation, I think overall it's a positive legislation. I hate coming across buildings where they've deferred a depreciation report for 15 years. For me, 5 years is a little quick. My sweet spot for a depreciation report for a tower, for example, an average tower is about 7 years. And I also don't believe that one needs to be done very early on in the process. Now, the problem with this legislation is it's very blanket. It's basically saying for all strata corporations, 5 units or more, you have to do it every 5 years. And in fact, new strata corporations, so this would be in a new building, for instance, they have to have their first depreciation report done within 2 years of their first annual meeting. So basically 2 years in existence, almost a brand new building, that building now has to get a depreciation report done. You might be thinking, well, what's the disadvantage of getting this report done? It's not cheap. It's very expensive to get these reports done. We're looking at anywhere from 15 to 20,000 to even more than that for certain buildings. So this is a significant expense that a strata is going to have to incur every 5 years. And that's why for me, I always look at things from both sides, from a homeowner angle, from an investor angle. I don't want to see this report done all the time every 5 years. I also don't want to see it deferred year over year over year. So now, brand new building, you're 2 years in, you already have to pay this significant expense. So what I would have liked to see are some exceptions to the rules. The other thing that I think is pretty interesting is you have to basically get these depreciation reports done on bare land strata as well, which is basically it's not even like a strata development. Oftentimes these homes are detached, much more well served by way of a standard home inspection. Yet they're going to fall under this depreciation report category. And then to also mention, I mentioned the minimum amount of units is 5. If you're in a 7 or an 8 unit townhome complex, again, you're probably more better served as a seller and even as a buyer to just have a standard home inspection done on that property. The depreciation report is not going to give you so much more info that it's going to be worth the money spent on it. So I feel like that minimum number of units should have been bumped up. I don't think one is so important very early on in the process. And I also don't think you should say 5 years for every single situation. I think it should vary depending on the type of building. But overall, generally, I think it's positive. Now, if you're a seller and you're thinking, oh man, I'm gonna have to spend this money, it can be very positive for you too. So a good depreciation report, one that shows that there's not a lot of work upcoming, the building is in good shape, it's recent, that's a very positive thing. There's actually a building down the street from me here in New West, and they just did an entirely new exterior, basically everything on the outside, the siding, the balconies, the windows. It's a completely new building from how it looked before. We call this as part of like a rain screen, but also doing all the exterior cladding. It's essentially a new building and a significant capital upgrade for that building. And I think, the perfect time for that building to do a depreciation report is right after making those upgrades, because now you can go to buyers and you can say, take a look. We don't have windows upcoming for 50 years. We don't have anything on the exterior upcoming for the next 20 to 25 years. And you can paint the picture of, this is going to be a low cost building for you maintenance wise moving forward. So sometimes the depreciation report, although it's now being mandated every 5 years, sometimes it's strategic in terms of when you want to complete and pay for this work. You can do it so that your building is shown in its best light for buyers based on the work that you've most recently done. So those are the scope of the announcements by the BC provincial government when it comes to the depreciation reports. I do hope, because now what we're going to see is we're going to see a lot more buildings, of course, going through this process. There's going to be a lot more work for the engineers and the consultants that do these depreciation reports. I'm hoping that that market gets a little bit more competitive so the prices aren't extremely high on the homeowners. I also think that if you get a depreciation report done, a full one done 5 years, an updated revised depreciation report should come at a discounted price when you're doing the next one, because let's be realistic about it. Not a lot changes in 5 years with these structures, right? Barring some sort of incredible weather event or God forbid, earthquake, something along those lines. Not much changes with the structures. I think that the updated depreciation report should come at a lower cost, and I hope that market gets a bit more competitive, so stratas are not getting gouged out there for their money when they're having to create these reports. All right, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit because we are very close to May 1st, and May 1st is now the implementation of the BC government's policy surrounding short-term rentals and only being able to rent short-term if it's your principal residence. I say it's interesting because as of a few days ago, just read an article, there are still 1,000 units out there on Airbnb that are showing expired licenses. I can tell you from experience and being out on the street that there are a lot of these units being listed, have been listed, have sold, sitting on the market. A lot of these converting into the rental market, long-term rental market, which is kind of put a bit of a breather on the Vancouver rental market slightly, although prices are still going up. So it's going to be interesting to see, which direction this goes. I think, needless to say, I've done a video on this as well. This is going to put a huge strain on our tourism and hotel sector moving forward. And already I've been kind of looking at the different costs for certain hotels. Standard hotels, how much it costs today in the middle of April. I did it a couple of weeks ago, and how much that same room would cost in May. And I saw some jumps, $150 a night for the middle of the week, Wednesday. Now you're paying $200 more a night. And so I think we're going to see, we already are seeing a lot of pressure, and we're seeing a lot of increased prices on the hotel front. For the big events, obviously with Taylor Swift coming, and hotels, cheap motels charging thousands of dollars a night. The provincial government came out and they said, look, we're not stopping you from renting short-term during these events. You can just go out of town for a couple of days, rent your place, and come back. I don't really think that's the solution. I think that's an interesting comment. Looking at what I just talked about with strata depreciation reports, I think blanket policies are what get us in trouble. I think nuanced and detailed policies that have different tiers for different types of properties, etc., they are trickier to come up with. They take more time to come up with, but I think they have a better chance of success. So what I'd like to see moving forward is less, let's create a policy for everyone, and there's going to be a whole chunk of people this is going to disadvantage, but there will be some people that it will advantage, and let's try and be a little bit more nuanced with some of the changes. So this is something that I'm going to watch. Swinging it back to the real estate market, April, another month, we're almost at the end of the month, another month of heavy new listing activity. I mentioned in a previous video that this is going to be a very telling month when we look at pricing. How is the pricing going to line up? We've had excess inventory drop in March and April. And when I say excess, I don't mean historically over 20, 30 years. I mean over the near, short, and midterm. We're finally starting to see those inventory levels. And if the prices are going to continue to go up or even remain flat, that is going to show us exactly how resilient this market is. So I will have that data. I should have that data for either next week's video or the following week's video. I will report back here, but that's going to be very interesting to see. We will find out how resilient the market truly is. So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. Again, if you wanted to chat with me one-on-one about your real estate situation, you can just book me for a free call in the Calendly link below, or you can just give me a call, shoot me a text, send me a message, whatever is easiest for you. And if you enjoy this weekly real estate content, subscribe to this channel, share the video with a friend, comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. But I want to thank you so much for watching this video again, and I look forward to seeing you next week.